Today I'm back with Tyler Kleinhuizen, strongman competitor, power lifter, just overall beast. Today I'm back with Tyler Kleinhuizen, strongman competitor, power lifter, just overall beast. We did the video on deadlifting last week, and this week I want to focus on squatting. Now again, the big six: squat, deadlift, bench, row, overhead press, pull down, compound movements. I can't stress enough, you want to be doing these compound movements, and at any age. I love the squat because we're focusing on our quads, big muscles, big prime mover muscles. If you do it right, you prevent knee injuries, just like all of these movements. You do these movements right, you're preventing injuries. You do them wrong, obviously, you're setting yourself up for injury. So the squat, not super complicated. Again, similar to the deadlift, a natural movement. Don't overthink it, but I like to teach it where you initiate with your butt. You push your butt out, you get your bar. You can start with a broomstick if you've never done it. Push your butt out, squat down, push up. It's that simple. Now, Tyler and I will talk about it after he goes through the motion, but just focus on what he's doing and you'll see the right way to do it. Okay, so last week, Tyler, we talked about footwear. Same thing applies for deadlifting as it does for squatting, I assume?
For the most part. Sometimes if somebody does not have good mobility in their ankles, they might get a little benefit of something with a raised heel. They'd be labeled as a cross-training shoe or Olympic lifting type shoe would be okay, but again, if you have the mobility in your ankle, definitely squat flat-footed, minimal support.
How do you determine if somebody has the appropriate amount of mobility in their ankle?
Sure. Easiest test is you'd get by an upright and be within a couple inches of it. And if you can bring your knee forward to touch that upright, you should be able to squat flat-footed. If you can go even more, you should be able to squat flat-footed. If you literally cannot reach it, then you might need to raise the heel in order to reach it.
Like I said at the beginning of the video, I like to talk about pushing your butt out and then squatting down. How do you teach people when they're beginners how to squat?
Well, if people remember from last week, we talked about the pelvis and the spine being in line with each other and not separating that. Again, I would say start with your glutes to the rear, same concept. One easy way for anybody, regardless of skill level, to make sure they're doing an appropriate squat is just to drape your arms loosely over your chest, never reaching them forward, but to the rear, squat down, aiming your elbows for your knees. If you can do that, it basically forces your body to hinge properly and your pelvis and spine stay in line with each other. We talked about head position as well.
With the deadlift.
One of the biggest issues with squats I find is people are trying to arch upward and it throws off their hip position. So I always say have a top focal point and have a bottom focal point and move between those as you go throughout your rep.
So if you're to put that into practice, and again, I like to think about keeping the shoulders back. That's pretty much true of everything, but if you're not consciously thinking about it, a lot of people forget. So as you're squatting, you would pick a spot, maybe the ceiling line or something, and you're looking at that, and then
then what
and
I
then
would...
you transition to a different spot.
Yeah, so I would
Correct?
just say keep your neck and spine in line with each other. So as I bear the load through the squat, my torso is tilting forward. So if I'm right here, you know, I'm maybe 8 feet in front of me and then straight in front of me. And I would move gradually between the two as I squat up and down.
Good, and so what are some of the really common errors you see with beginners that are squatting? Maybe squat depth is a big one that I see. A lot of times people they're just doing this, just barely squatting down.
Sure. Cardinal rule of squatting would be never let your knees come forward past your toes, and always keep your knee joint above your ankle joint. So if we're inside or if we're outside or any variation outside of that, just eliminate it. Straight lines, 90-degree angles, as much as we can. Two main cardinal rules of squatting is we don't want to have at any point our knees forward past our toes. And then the other one would be I want to have my knee joint over my ankle joint. So I don't want to ever have my knees outside of my ankles. I don't want to ever have my knees inside of my ankles. I want to keep my knees directly over my ankles.
Good, so I do see a lot of people collapsing their knees in. And you know, one of the ways to keep your knees from going way out over your toes is to keep your weight back. You know, and again, I think usually if you start by pushing your butt out, that should be the first move that you have when you're squatting, not bending your knees. If you're bending your knees first, oftentimes your knees get way out. But if you start the squat by pushing back, then your knees stay back, and it, you know, it keeps your weight back too. Now, what about your hands? So, you know, you can hold the bar in here, you can hold it out here. What's your take on hand position on the bar?
I don't worry nearly as much about hand position as I do about shoulder blade position. So as long as you can pin your shoulders back and together, wherever your hands can comfortably be. You know, sometimes if people go too wide, they'll lose that position. Sometimes if they go too close, they'll lose that position. So as long as you can keep your shoulder blades pinned basically back and together, that's our goal.
And that's true of so many moves. I'm telling you guys, you got to keep your shoulders back. It feels crazy because we don't these days. Today we tend to hunch our shoulders so much that bringing them back to a power position actually feels extreme, but it's where you really should be. One other thing I've learned is that way out here, not so much, but if you're a little bit out, you can activate your lats. You can literally feel your lats flexing. Whereas if you're way too far in, you can't flex your lats. Try it. Put your hand here and see if you can flex your lats, which is this big muscle on your back. Put it out here and try and flex your lats. You'll recognize your lats are now tight, flexed, gives you a stronger, more stable back, and you won't hurt your back. And that's the key with squatting. You definitely don't want to hurt your back. You don't want to be rounding. You know, knees and back are vulnerable. Strengthen them. Don't put them in a position of injury. Put them in a position of strength, and you'll have less injuries. Sure.
And if I can add one more thing, typical progression for somebody with squatting properly is I would have somebody work through an eccentric, very slowly coming down and controlling their position and the tip of their hips through the whole range. Because sometimes you'll find a difficult range that you need to work through finding your balance and controlling a load versus trying to move right through it right away. So if I can go slowly down and even stop and hold at any point before I worry about repping down and up and down and up.
Good, and another trick I use is to video myself. I literally put a video camera. I like to have it exactly sideways to me because that allows me to see where my knees are going. If they're pushing out over my toes, it allows me to see, you know, if I'm hunching my back. And I recommend you do that too, because oftentimes you feel like you're doing something, but then you see it and it's really obvious. That's it. Good.
Cool.